We're recording. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bill Jordan here live from the beautiful downtown Newark, New Jersey. I'm with Urbicon Studios, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Don Victor. He's a very interesting guy, and I want to let him tell you what he's all about. Good morning, Don Victor. How are you today?
Hey, Bill. Doing well.
So tell me, what Don, is that Don meaning like that's your Donald, or what's this Don thing? What is that all about? Who
Donald. No, my real name is Donna, but no, I'm just joking. Actually, it's funny. You're the one who called me that the first time. So Don is just a title, and my name is Victor. And then I don't know, maybe about 9-10 months ago, you started calling me Don Victor, and then other people started calling, and I'm like, "What's up with this Don Victor stuff?" Right? And then kind of just stuck, and just kind of embraced it. And so and now it's just not with me, but we have a couple Dons and Donias in the academy. So basically, as you come in to the academy and mature,
what's the academy? Who are these other people? I mean, your name is Don Victor. What do you do? I mean,
what do I do? Right now, I'm the head instructor, the master coach at the academy, and I train artists who usually approach their artwork in an intuitive manner, to learn how to become much more intentional about the composition and designing their work.
Why is that important?
Why? Well, for a lot of reasons. One, when you're trying to communicate something and you're not intentionally thinking through the nuances of that communication, then you open it up for accidents to happen, and not necessarily good accidents. So, for example, if you spend a lot of time drawing and painting out your image, but you have a value contrast up in the right-hand corner when you're supposed to, when the viewer is supposed to be looking in the bottom left-hand corner, it throws the artwork off whack.
But I thought that being an artist, I could do whatever I want. I don't have to worry about planning or anything. It's just I'm a special type person, and I just express myself. Isn't that what art's about?
Well, that's absolutely right. But if and that's why we have starving artists. But if you want to communicate and connect with another human being, then if you want to connect with another human being, then you have to communicate. So there's a part of being the artist who spends all that time feeling themselves and getting all into their feelies, which is absolutely good and necessary. But you do that so that you can better relate to others. And then when you express that through your artwork, you have to then figure out how to translate that experience so that other people can experience it.
So are you saying there's a right way or a wrong way to do art? Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's a funny question, Bill. When I was younger, yes. As I'm getting older, I'm becoming a little more flexible rather than saying right or wrong, that there are rules that you've got to apply. But there are principles that make your work effective or not effective.
Give us an example of that.
Huh?
Can you give me an example?
For example, if I throw paint on the screen, then I'm giving the control over to the chaos or to the randomness of it. And if I want you to experience what I'm feeling, then I have to spend time in that feeling and figure out how do I translate that in the language. And the language we use is design. That's the visual language. And so I have to manage the directions of my lines or my edges in my image. I have to direct and
is that what you teach at the Academy of Composition?
Of course. So, how to manage your lines, your spaces, and your values.
So if that's the case, what's the difference between managing and not managing? I mean, there's a lot of art out there.
Well, I think the easiest way to look at it is, we're on the East Coast. I'm in Pennsylvania. You're in New Jersey. But if we were wanted to take a trip over to California, if you don't state where you want to be, right, and then design a trip that gets you there. Now, the trip that gets you there, you could go up north or go down south. You could spend a lot of time in the east and then shoot out to the west. I mean, there's all these different possibilities to get you to California. But if you don't know you want to go to California, then you don't know how to plan for that. And then you might end up in Mexico thinking that you're in California, and or in Canada. Like, man, I thought California was going to be a lot warmer than it is here, right?
In other words, at the Academy of Composition, you help people do that, make maps and of what their intentions are. Is that what you said?
Absolutely, absolutely. So we want.
How does that go? What process have you developed to accomplish this goal?
Well, we break it down to 4 stages. Okay, so we start with the story, and then we go through story, line, and space. And so, really, with the story part of this, each area.
Excuse me. Go ahead.
Each area has its own intelligence, okay? And so when we're dealing with the story, there's ways to articulating what it is that you want to communicate. Now, the story doesn't necessarily have to be a narrative, right? It doesn't have to be, John and Jane walked up the hill, because that was on a weekend. During the week, it was Jack and Jill who were walking up the hill, but John and Jane walking up on the weekends. And so that's a narrative, right? But you can also, your story can also just be sharing a feeling that you might have, like a sensation, something, you see something, a flower, and you're just like, oh man, it's just so beautiful, so lovely, And then you figure out using line and space, which are the other 2 aspects of this process.
This sounds like a pretty complicated
Of course it is.
Well, I mean, like, I just want to learn how to paint. I mean,
well, then go to a painting academy and you'll learn how to paint. So, and that's perfectly fine. But painting is painting. With all due respect, painting is not.
Well, you know what I mean.
Posing.
Like, for the person out there watching this who doesn't know what you know, and a person who could benefit from what you know to, you teach them, how would you encourage them to bring them in? Is there a challenge for them? Is there some type of reward they get? Is some type of, and they're going to be more enthusiastic in their work? They're going to be more studious? I mean, what is it about? They have to just be a head person, a heart person, a gut person? What do they have to be?
What I've witnessed when training artists is that they feel for the first time they're engaging their entire brain and their entire being, because the art making process is both. It is very, very intuitive and creative and freeing, and yet it also deals with the geometry of actually the doing, making this visual artifact, which then brings in understanding your boundaries and your constraints, and how to work with inside of those things. And so it adds the math, but it also adds the freedom. And we are uniquely designed as an artist to be able to deal with both those realities.
Isn't this what they
if we only lean towards one, then the work fails,
Isn't this stuff they learn in art school? Why do they have to come to you?
Because they don't learn this in art school.
Get out of here. Come on, man.
So you go to art school and they'll teach you how to be free.
But in art school, it's very expensive. You go there for years, and you come out, and you're supposed to be an artist, right?
Most universities that I've seen, when you go there, they don't really give you solid instruction, right? What they give you is they pat you on the head and they stroke your ego, and they say, good little artist, you're free, go free. And then what happens is you get out of that, you spend $100,000 on an education, you become a glorified waiter, and
okay.
And then if you really get serious, if you want to continue that education because you're not really fulfilled from your college years, then you go into an atelier. And an atelier, a lot of times, especially in our culture where we have these, these master ateliers, right? Where, give me 1 second here.
What is an atelier?
It's basically a master student type of, master apprentice type of relationship.
Okay.
And you go to, it's kind of like a small private school.
Have you lost your video? I can't see you.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out here. Let me see something here real quick. And so in the ateliers, what happens is they then often focus much more on the academic aspect of it. And so you learn how to copy things really, really well.
Okay.
And again, that's really important too, right? So, I mean, you really learn your drawing skills. The problem is that when people leave out of atelier, oftentimes, they're really excited because they're as a technician, they're really, really, really good. But they still lack the ability to tell a story. They still lack the ability of triggering an emotion in another human being. And they become master copiers of things, even if it's like, a portrait of somebody, they're copying that, or they're copying, what it is, a still life or a landscape, but they're not composing it.
So what happens? So you must have a lot of people who come to you from ateliers. What do they experience? What can they look forward to working with you?
A lot of the students, I work oftentimes with older students who have been, painting for 20, maybe 30 years, professionals. And when they come into the mind of the composer, into the composer's mindset, into this part of art making, which is the composition aspect of it, they realize they've heard of it, but they've never been taught it and they've never spent time in it. And they're blown away by how much information is there. And oftentimes they'll come, just spending 2-3 months in that environment, they realize, wow, even though I've been making a great living as an artist for 20 years, I really don't know very much.
Well, could you give me I understand you have one student who did very well at some very prestigious art exhibit. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, Michelle. When she came to me 3 months ago, she had to go into this exhibition. And so when you come and you go through our process, we require that you create a small collection, okay? And there's a reason for that. And so her collection was going to be these flag paintings that this gallery has asked her to produce. She was getting a name for herself with these flag paintings, but she was tired of painting flag paintings, right? She was like, all right, I'm just producing flag paintings. I want to be an artist, right? And so what we did is we said, okay, the constraint is that you have to have the flag, but we have to look past the flag. And she came up with a series of paintings that talked about pride, talked about spirit, community, and so on. And we composed out community. We composed out pride. We composed out these different feelings and concepts, all related around the flag. So she wasn't painting a flag. And actually, in most of the paintings, we subdued the flag. So the flag was present, but it was the energy of the painting that you felt. So she was intimidated because one of her idols was in this show, and it was her and 2 other guys. And I said to her, I said, you will be the shining star of that show. And she just kind of smiled like she always does, but looked at me like, what an arrogant son of a... And I just looked at her and smiled back, knowing that I knew what I know. I just know once you get this information, you go through it, things magically happen, things change. And so she went through the process. The show was about 2 weeks ago, I guess, and she put her paintings up in there. And at the end of the day, only 4 paintings out of the entire show sold. And one of them was this little 12 by 8 painting. And the other 3 were almost, I think they were like 30 by 30 paintings, right? They were much larger. And the 3 were hers.
So you mean like your student took 3 out of 4 of the sales of that?
Absolutely. So not only was she a shining star, but she walked away with shining gold in her pocket.
So are you saying that this lady did well because she worked with you?
But listen, people went to that gallery show. The fact that she sold 3 paintings that were not cheap means that people came with the intention to buy, had the resources to buy, but for some reason chose to pick her rather than the others. Now, if she was not at that show, I'm convinced that those people would have paid for the other artwork. But by having her work next to them, it was obvious that the money went to where the quality was. And the quality wasn't in her painting, the quality was in her composition.
Okay, so now you're making a distinction. It's like you're saying that the composition is like the bones of the structure of the body, and the painting's like the skin. Is that what you're saying?
You could say that. I like to always say that the composition is the architecture of a house. The painting is the contractor. So ultimately what you're looking at is what the contractor builds, but the fact that you're experiencing this house, the way the space moves and invites you from the kitchen into the living room, all of that stuff, the way you experience the painting, that was created by the architect. The execution of what the architect envisioned is what the contractor does. And in this case, it's what the painter does or the sculptor does. But it is the designer, the composer, who thinks up the idea, lays out the plan to execute it, and then you take that hat off, and then you put your executor hat on, which if you're a painter, you paint.
Right.
Another way I like to say it is in music. There is a person who writes the music and writes the lyrics, and then there's the person who performs it. Sometimes they're the same people.
Right.
Right? But there are a lot of musicians are great performers. They're great singers. Doesn't mean they can write a song.
So, for example, that's like Carole King.
Mm-hmm.
Carole King wrote a ton of hit songs for different groups. But no one knew about her, but she was, like you say, the composer.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So like you must have a serious problem with people knocking down your door, blowing up your phone, trying to get in contact with you.
Well, I don't know how to answer that question. It's the truth is no, I don't, because this information is so valuable that I can't just put it out there for $10 courses. So the lives and the artwork that are changed by it, it comes with a value, and obviously to be competitive, in my mind, the value is far less than what we should be charging for it. But we're not out there selling $50 courses, just because.
So how it sounds like it's just more than just learning a skill. It's like life development in a way. How do people's lives change? Can you give us an example?
Yeah, because as a composer, when you begin to train your mind, see, composition really is thinking. It's very little, it's not like you're going to learn to render or mix paint, right? You go to a painting workshop to learn how to mix paint, right? Or you just go and you learn how to do it by practicing it. But the thinking behind the mixing of the paint is the composition, right? So what value are you going to do it? What temperature are you going to do it? What saturation level are you going to do it? All of these questions and the answers to those questions is what we experience on the canvas. That's the composition part of it, the designing part of it. The actual hand part of it, the labor doing it, that's the painting part of it, right? That's the medium.
That's the application.
And so that's what?
The application.
Absolutely. And so that's not what the composer is. And I think that's one reason why it's not taught often, because it's just easy. It's much easier to teach people a bunch of skills, right? Press this button, pull this widget, and this thing comes out. But
how do you go about converting someone, helping someone to do this? I mean, do you have a system in place?
Well, yeah, we have instruction so that you get the information. Okay. But just because you get the instruction, you need to be able to practice it. And in our case, you have to be able to practice the thinking of it. And we give you two options, two places to practice that. One, through your work, right? So you can actually think about it and execute it through your hands. But then also through conversation. So what we do is, there's the instructional part of the academy, and then there's what we call the meetups. So every week, the composers meet in small groups online for about 2 hours, and they critique each other, right? But we don't talk about painting techniques or sculpture techniques or anything like that. We purely focus on the elements of composition, because the composition is what's going to follow through the entire process from concept to finish. Even when you go and you put it on a wall, you want to think about, okay, what color is your frame? What color is the wall? Because if the frame is black and the wall is white, now your highest point of contrast is that frame to the wall relationship, and it competes now with your painting.
So are you saying that besides just composing the piece itself, you help people compose their exhibitions?
Absolutely, because you got to compose everything. And that's why it changes your life, because you realize, and this is one of the mottos at the Academy, as in art, so in life. Because as you learn, for example, let's start with painting. Like if you're looking at a painting, right, one of the simple rules that you learn that dramatically improves your artwork is limit your palette. Right? If you paint with every color in the rainbow, you're going to get a crappy looking painting. So most painters know that. They limit their palette. So we teach something very similar. When you deal with lines, we have 360 possible degrees to a line, and there's more than that, obviously, but 360 in a circle. We limit it to 5 to 8 lines, because that, just like in painting, it brings clarity and beauty and harmony and unity. Right? It exudes those things. But then you translate that into your own life. What do they say? The 5 people that you surround yourself are like you. So that is your limited palette. That is your limited line gamut. If I have a bunch of verticals in an image, it's going to communicate a certain energy. It's going to be strong and direct, right? If I have a lot of diagonals, that's going to give an energy of moving forward and violence and force, right? If I have a bunch of horizontals, it's going to be peaceful and restful.
So once again, this sounds like a very thorough process. And if I were to come into your system, take me through the process. How would I come in? Do I talk to you? I mean, do I have people to help me along the way? How does it work?
All right. So normally what we do is we want to look at your work and have a conversation first. Okay. We do these feedback sessions where you come in either by yourself or in a group. And
when are the feedback sessions?
What was that?
When are the feedback sessions? Do you have them weekly?
Well, we have them all the time, but we'll post them. You can check them out on Fridays on Facebook. We call it Fine Art Feedback Friday.
Okay. And that Facebook, what is it called? Just Fine Art Feedback?
You can friend me at Don Victor MC, and then I'll post it there, and you'll be able to just maybe even do a search in Facebook for Fine Art Feedback, and it will come up. Okay. So But if you're interested in, reach out to me somehow. Either go to the website, my phone number's on there, call me. And what we'll do is we'll sit down and take a look at your work. We'll either just do an assessment. We may do a feedback type of session. And at that point, when you want to then join the academy, you just go to core80.com, click the little button, sign up, and you'll get immediate access to the story section of the academy. And in 7 days, you'll get access to the line, and then and so on. And you'll go from story, line, space, and value. And each section, we have an 80-day curriculum. So every day there's just a little task that you have to do that moves you through this process. And once you watch the first video, the first class, it'll tell you what's in that video and also what are the 10 the first class. It's 10 days. So during those 10 days, what's expected of you. Now the thing is that the 80-day is there to help guide you. It's not a rule, like it's not a law. So if it takes you 160 days, that's fine. If it takes you 40 days, that's fine. It's just there to kind of give you some guidance.
Any other online course?
What was that?
How does your program differ from other online courses? It sounds
well, most online courses, you just watch the video and then they might give you what they call a forum where you can just type stuff and then you spend the rest of your life writing things to people and not painting. So what we do is we give you the instruction through the video, and then on a weekly basis, we have 2 touch points. Okay, so one touch point is the weekly meetup where we meet live like we are on right now on this interview. And we have people in Australia and California and Canada and all over the world, okay? So you meet with a small group of composers, you share your work, you get feedback, you give feedback, and then we also buddy you up. We call them peer reviews, okay? So 4 days after that meetup, whatever you guys discussed in that meetup, you then post, and you'll have somebody who will give you feedback and you give them feedback, okay? Now, other people in your group can give you feedback, but this one person has been designated to give you feedback and you them.
So this happens on a weekly basis? Is that what
that happens on a weekly basis, right? So basically every 4 days you're getting a review, and then 3 days later you're getting your meetup and so on.
Okay, so now let's say I sign up, I get the first part is the story. What happens after when I'm done with my story? What do I
Okay, so once you're done with the first phase, then you'll sign up. You basically get a one-on-one with one of the more advanced students. And so you'll just sit and talk about your story. And there's 5 questions that you need to answer. So when you get to that little one-on-one, you guys have some type of framework to go off of. Then you go in
happens at each stage,
exactly. So when you get to the line, you'll meet up with somebody who has a knack for line. Okay. And then when you get to the space, the grid work, you'll meet with somebody who has a knack for grids, and then a knack for values. And so you'll have these touch points with people who are on the same page with you. You'll have the group, and then between each stage, you'll get to meet with someone who's.
It sounds like you have a very important support system. It's like live support, not online support. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Absolutely. Because composition is about the management of relationships.
Okay.
And so we have to manage the relationships, the growing process. And for me, my success is only seen if you're successful. And we have to define what your success is. Some people will need to sell, they want to sell paintings, and that's, and be significant out in the art world, and that's really important to them. Some people, they're more concerned about legacy, and they want to make sure that they are leaving a body of work that represents who they are and their ideas long after they're gone, and that body of work communicates clearly those thoughts. So
this is all done in the 80 days?
well, in the 80 days, what you're going to learn is, I promise you this, most artists are frustrated when it comes to composition. In 80 days, you'll be confident, okay? You won't be a master in 80 days, but you will be confident. You'll know the language. You'll know how to articulate it. When you're in your studio, you'll know how to basically begin to start asking the right questions, and you'll have solutions to move past that.
What can I expect?
In a half a year.
What can I expect as a result of going through the process?
Well, you're going to get tremendous confidence, okay? You're going to see that your artwork, depending on the way that you approach your artwork, okay, you're going to find that you've been using crutches. You know, it might be a certain type of painting technique. It might be that, you know, for one artist, you know, they might be bringing in gold paint to make it look more luxurious, right? Or something like that. And when you realize, oh, wait, the power is in the composition, it frees you up from using all the gimmicks and all the little tricks, and you can just focus on communicating your idea in a really, really solid and effective way. And so it frees people from, you know, it frees them from having to trick people into thinking that their work is unique.
So in other words, if I join your system, went to the program, I would feel very confident about my work. I wouldn't have to.
You would feel what?
I feel confident. I wouldn't have to. What about pricing? Do you get into that? Do you teach me how to price?
Well, one of the things is at the Academy, because we really want to develop quality artists, right? Or quality composers. That's something that we are really, we're starting to build out in the Academy, is an education system on how do you sell your stuff? How do you sell yourself? How do you price your work? How do you see? You can price your work higher if you're a composer, because you can have a conversation with somebody and let them know, hey, this line here starts at this point, ends at this point, goes in this direction, because all three of those elements help support the intention of the piece, right? The reason why this value is lighter here and not darker there is because of this specific reason. And you have the ability to know your work so intimately, because every space and line and value has been intentionally locked in like a puzzle, that you'll be able to express and communicate that to the buyer or to your audience, and they see it and they get it.
Well, how can your artists, how do you help artists present their work to, let's say, a possible portrait client? How do you help them do that?
Well, because we're composing, and the composition process is really managing the invisible reality, okay? So, and what I mean by that is, if you think of a line, you have one line, and you cut that line in half, and you separate it, now you have a line, and then you have a space, and then you have a line, right? So, but in reality, you still have one line. Your eye reads it as one line. But if you take one of those segments and you shift it upward, well, now you have two lines. You have this break. And so most artists are focused on the two lines. We're focused on the effect of those two lines. And so when you're looking at a portrait, we're not gonna teach you how to draw eyeballs, noses, and teeth, right? And pretty hair or no hair. What we're going to show you is, how do you sit down with the client or the subject? How do you determine very rapidly who they are, what the personality is? All of these things are invisible, not their eyeballs and their head.
How do you guys do that? I mean, you have some type of special...
Well, then, if you want to know that, you got to join the Academy. But but there's questions you can ask. There's things that you look for, and And then when you go to translate that on your canvas, when you go to compose and design that portrait out, there are techniques that you can use that automatically convey those things. And so when someone looks at the portrait, yeah, it's going to have their likeness, right? But let me tell you this, Bill. There's an old saying that it's called spit and image. Spit and image. That's a spitting image of that young man over there. He's a spitting image of his father, right? What is this? What does spit and image mean? It comes from two words: spirit and image. Okay, so he is in the spirit and in the image or the likeness of his father, right? And so most artists are focused on trying to capture the likeness. They have no idea how to capture the spitting, the spirit.
Okay, so you're saying basically that when you not only does someone see the image, but they see the spirit or the feeling in your students' work. Is that right?
Yeah, what I like to call it is the image is the noun of the person. The spirit is the verb of the person.
Okay, so are you saying then that most art today is noun driven?
It's noun driven. It's all about the question that they're consumed with is does this look like the person? They will almost never ask this question. When I look at this painting, do I feel the same way as I would if I was sitting in that person's presence?
That's pretty powerful. That's very powerful. So in other words, you're saying you can help people do that?
Absolutely. And it's not difficult to do it, but you've got to think differently. You got to ask different questions.
Okay. And what about, it sounds like you have to submit.
I'm sorry, what was that?
It sounds like your system is pretty rigorous. It sounds like you have to submit to discipline of some type. What is the discipline like?
Well, discipline gets a little hard because we do this online. So if it was a physical school, I'd have a big ruler and I would walk down like a nun and yell, "Do it right!"
Pull out your hands.
But yes, it is what it is. If it wasn't rigorous, if it didn't require great amounts of thought, then the great minds of art like Da Vinci and Michelangelo, Picasso would have never been attracted to such a thing.
Wait, you're telling me Picasso was a great composer? I thought he just threw stuff around.
When a man looks at a book and he opens up an encyclopedia, let's say he goes to an encyclopedia and he looks at it, and he knows that on those pages are a bunch of letters, but he's illiterate. So he has no idea if those things are thrown around or if they're strategically placed in a cognitive order.
That's a pretty strong indictment.
That has great power in it.
You're saying there's a lot of illiterate art people out there? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we call it. Most art classes in public school are really art and craft classes. They're designed, and college is very similar. They're designed really with the idea of creating refrigerator art, and it's much more about stroking someone's ego, having them do something fun and creative and pretty and nice. When you get into the composition process, now we're getting into what we call visual literacy. So, which implies that you have to be trained in this language to be able to write in that language. In our case, it would be so I can appreciate the art, but if I'm illiterate, I cannot decode the art.
Well,
I cannot look past what I see and actually get a couple things. One, what the artist was truly intending for the piece. And two, I will never really connect with the artist, their mind, if I can't read what they wrote.
I like all that stuff. I just want to know something a little bit more down to earth in terms of like, what's your goal? I mean, what's the goal with your organization? And does it come out of some like a past, your past experiences that have led you to this point? How did you get to where you are now?
Well, I don't know, Bill, how to answer that. If you want to go, my why doesn't bring you closer to the earth; it brings you closer to the heavens.
Well,
so I'm not really sure how to answer that, but I'll answer it this way.
Okay.
Okay, I'll give you both answers. Okay. My why, if you will, is I am personally terrified, if you want to use that word. I'm really not terrified, but kind of. And what I mean by that is when I die and I go before the great composer in the sky, I am not afraid that when I was 15 years old, I watched a little naughty video, right? I'm not afraid of being, judged or condemned or whatever for, saying stupid things to people sometimes or whatever it might have been, right? For reckless eyeballing or whatever. My greatest fear is to stand before the Maker and be rebuked for not fulfilling my purpose on this planet. And my purpose is to teach artists how to compose. Okay? So that is the only fear that I have that drives me. Now, to bring it back to Earth, my goal is really to change the way we talk about art, both together as artists, the public and artists, the artist to the artist. You're in your studio alone, how you're talking about your art.
Why is that?
I'm trying to change that.
Why do you want to change that?
Because I think the conversation, especially the self-dialogue conversation, will either weaken us or empower us. So let me give you an example. I had a conversation the other day with a lady, and she said, "Oh, children are artists." I said, "Oh, okay, great." I said, "Why is that?" And she said, "Well, because they can create things, and they have a desire to create things. Therefore, they're artists." I said, "Oh, that's amazing." Well, so when I go to the child who has a desire to help people, does that make them a doctor? And she said, "Of course not." See, in her mind, in her conversation, the artists were cute. Doctors are sophisticated and they need great levels of education.
But
and yet
artists don't, everybody knows artists don't need that. You just get some paint at the store and just go to it.
Exactly. And so what they look at it is they say, well, because you were able to do something that I can see, it must be art. Okay. Right? And it's like, no.
That's the case. And like you brought up something interesting. Is there a certain criteria, a general criteria that you would say that makes up art?
What I personally, at this point in my existence, I have come to this conclusion. Art is where the science of what you do, your craft, overlaps your personality. Okay? It's where the emotional intelligence of a human overlaps the IQ of the human. Okay? Mm-hmm. So there has to be both a level of passion and there has to be a merging between that passion and the mind, right? So the heart and the mind, the right brain and the left brain. Okay. If it's only one-sided, then you'd never achieve art. You never achieve that place of delight, right?
So in other words, back to your example about the lady with the children were just doing it intuitively, and you're saying that you have to have a skill set, and at the same time you have to have a headset.
And the child, for most children, they lack both. They lack the intelligence to actually do it, right? Yeah. So they're intuitively thinking through it, and they lack the emotional intelligence to understand what they're doing, right? So now, not saying that in the child isn't this aptitude, and it's like something's in them, it's pushing them into that direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
But very rarely, unless the child is trained to understand themselves on an emotional level and on an intellectual level, that they're going to actually produce great art.
Okay, so it sounds like if a person goes through your training, they're going to see art differently. Is that what you're saying?
That's my promise.
Okay.
You will see art very differently.
Now, when you're now you spoke about legacy. Tell me, do you have plans to pass this on to your family or something like that?
Absolutely. But my family is much more than my genetics. So even though I have a daughter and a son that I'm training, and I hope to have another daughter in the future that I'm training, my family expands beyond just the genetics. So what I'm looking for through the academy is to raise up people of a similar mindset who care about composition. And these are the two traits I'm looking for. That you see composition. So I'm not looking for the image. I'm looking for the spirit. I'm looking for the spitting, right?
Okay.
So in you, what I'm looking for are people who have two things. One, a desire for design, composition, who understand the importance of the management of the invisible and how it affects the visible in order so that it moves people, right? I hope that makes sense.
Pretty esoteric. Could you break it down for us?
Okay. What I'm looking for are people who are sensitive to the fact that the nuances have great effect. Okay, the little things have great effect. The details, and I don't mean like I don't want to use details because that's a bad word when it comes to artists. Because if you focus too much on the details, then you get lost in it, and that's not the art. That in the nuances, in the small choices, they have big consequences. Okay?
Sure.
And people who are sensitive to that, and they want and they desire to take the time to care for those little choices that have big results. Okay? So that's part of it. The other part is I'm looking for people who naturally have a teacher's heart or a father's heart or a mother's heart. Someone who cares about other people. Oftentimes, both of those qualities mix because you care for somebody, so let's say a teacher, and they understand if they can just have an influence in this person's life in this little way, 5, 10, 20, 30 years down the road, it's going to have a huge effect in their life, right?
How do you see the world as, say, 20 years from now as a result of the Academy of Composition?
Well, I'll be honest with you, man. I believe if we can encourage more artists to spend just one day in their studios, just one day in their art making process where they don't think about mixing paint or textures, they're not thinking about framing or exhibitions, they're not thinking about if their drawing is rendered beautifully. But if they just add one extra day in their art making process and only think about the composition, the design, how the space is working, they're going to see their artwork become quote unquote more beautiful. And I believe the more beautiful work that we can put out there, the more beautiful we make the world, and because to me, art broadcasts, it's just not something we see. It's constantly speaking to us. And if the elements in our paintings are managed in such a way, then we can control what's constantly being broadcast. Okay? So if we have a flower, but the flower is erratic, even though the flower is supposed to look beautiful, if it's erratic, it broadcasts out this chaos.
Right.
And we are saturated then in this chaos. Let me give you a practical example of a very similar way of thinking. When my children were being developed in the womb, okay, I made it my duty, okay, to be at every single doctor's appointment. Now, the reason why I did that was because of my crazy thinking, okay? I believed that my wife, every thought she had would be translated into a biochemical reaction in her body. So if she was sitting in that office alone, and for some reason her imagination made her feel alone, then that would be translated into a biochemical reaction in her body, and my baby would eat that. I called it the baby bar, right? The baby would drink fear. It would drink loneliness. It would drink ideas of abandonment, you know? And so I made sure that I sat next to her at every doctor's appointment so that there was no gap for her to ever feel alone, right? Okay. Or whatever the feelings were. And I made sure that I was funny. So we laughed a lot. Why? Because all of that stuff fed the baby. So it's the same thing with the art. You spend the time to manage those little nuances, and all of a sudden, it's the same flower, but rather than broadcasting a chaotic energy, you can broadcast a calm, peaceful energy. And now we're sitting in that energy. So it's going to help.
Based upon your talk so far, you can see that you're a very caring person. How do you rejuvenate yourself? What do you do for recreation?
Teach. I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm what they call a strategic entrepreneur. Strategic entrepreneurs don't find joy in doing anything but what they love to do. And so I love to teach composition. I love parenting. If I'm not doing one of those two things, I'm not in my zone. I'm not feeling alive. You know, if I'm going to go for a hike or for a walk or out to eat or whatever, I don't want to do any of it unless I'm doing it with somebody I love or enjoy. So, and that's the bottom line. So for me, if I'm not seeing artists grow in composition, seeing my children grow and who they are, then I'm not going to be a happy camper.
Okay, let's keep you happy. How can people get in contact?
That's.
How can people get in contact?
I'm sorry, what was that? How can people get in contact? You can go to core80.com.
Okay.
What was that?
Go ahead, core80.com.
Okay, core80 and then .com. You can go to Facebook and look up Don Victor MC. Okay. You can also, I think it's Don Victor MC on Instagram as well. But yeah. So that's how you can get in contact with me.
So just closing up now, because I know you have an important engagement this afternoon. Any encouraging words?
Gotta go support my brother.
Any additional encouraging words to the art community?
Yes. If you truly, truly believe that you are significant, that you are important, that you are powerful, then with that comes a great responsibility. If you believe, even if you don't believe that about yourself, but you believe that art is very significant and that is extremely important and that is extremely powerful, then there comes a great responsibility. You have to learn how to manage it so that you can use it to your benefit. So if you have an idea or a feeling you want to share with your audience, you can make sure that is significantly and important and powerfully communicated, and that people connect with it through the artwork, or if you think you are and you want to express yourself through your artwork so that other people get it, they feel it, they see it, they're impacted by it, then you have to learn how to do that. And you can spend another 20 years trying to figure it out, or you can come and not waste 20 years, but within 3 to 6 months, go from confidence to certain, like certain that you know what you're doing, you know? And I say 6 months, the reality is you'll always be growing, but what you can do in 3 months is grow in confidence. In 6 months, you're going to feel like you got fire coming out of your fingertips, because you can grow with the right information and in the right environment. You can grow very strong and very fast.
Well, with that, I'm sure that what else could I ask for? So I'm just going to leave it at that. Thank you, Don Victor, on behalf of all the artists out here. Looking forward to hooking up with you again soon and benefiting from your fantastic knowledge. This is Bill Jordan broadcasting live from beautiful downtown Newark, New Jersey, courtesy of Rubicon Studios. Again, thank you, Don Victor, and peace out. Ciao.